Rome fell. Everybody knows that part. What almost nobody tells you is what happened to the money and to the handful of people who saw it coming. 500 years of civilization unraveled in a single lifetime. Silver savings turned to worthless metal. The pensions of soldiers who'd guarded the frontier for 25 years erased overnight. And yet a few families walked out of the greatest collapse in history richer than they walked in. They held 4 assets, 4 specific things that didn't just survive the fall. They absorbed the wealth of everyone who didn't. And one of them is something every financial advisor alive today would call reckless, insane, irresponsible. The Romans who held it didn't just survive, they got rich. But to understand what survived, you have to understand what killed Rome first. Because Rome didn't die from barbarians. It died from its money, and it died from the inside. Rome's silver coin was the denarius. Under Augustus, it was 95% pure silver, and it was far more than currency. Every soldier's pay, every merchant's margin, every farmer's life savings sat inside that coin. It was trust you could hold in your hand. Then the bills came due. Wars on every frontier cost more than any tax could ever cover. So the emperors did what governments have always done when they can't pay. They cheated the money. They melted the coins down and quietly mixed in cheap metal. By the year 250, that 95% silver coin held less than 5%. Same face, same emperor, same stamped value. But scratch the surface and the bronze bled through. The people noticed. They always do. Prices exploded. Merchants refused the coins. Soldiers demanded more. Farmers abandoned their fields rather than sell grain for fake money. Historians call it the crisis of the 3rd century. 50 years, nearly 50 emperors, most of them murdered within months of taking the throne. An empire coming apart like wet paper. And against that backdrop, here is what actually held. Asset 1, the right kind of gold. Everyone says gold survived Rome. True. But the version you've heard is dangerously incomplete, and that gap has cost people fortunes in every collapse since. When Constantine seized power, he minted a new coin, the solidus. Pure gold, fixed weight, identical from every mint in the empire. No debasement, no games. And it worked. The solidus stayed the backbone of Mediterranean trade for 700 years, long after Rome itself was gone. But here's the part that never makes it into the story. Not all gold was equal. The streets were full of clipped coins, false weights, gold-washed fakes. The people who survived didn't just hold gold. They held gold they could weigh, test and trust in a direct deal, with no institution vouching for it. The wealthy started demanding raw gold by weight, refusing to trust any coin's name. Because they'd learned it early. The coin is a political tool. The metal is the value. Rome didn't teach us that gold is safe. Rome taught us that what can't be diluted can't be debased. Asset 2, and this is the one almost nobody talks about. Debt, not being owed money, owing it. Picture a Roman landowner who borrows 100,000 denarii in the year 200 to buy an estate. A genuine fortune. Now fast forward 80 years. The currency has lost over 90% of its silver. Prices have multiplied tenfold. But the loan, still written for 100,000 denarii. So, he pays it back, in coins now worth almost nothing. The lender had handed over good silver. He got back bronze with a silver tan. Inflation didn't just shrink the currency, it transferred wealth, quietly and massively, from everyone who lent to everyone who borrowed. The families who'd bought hard assets with debt watched that debt evaporate while the land stayed in their hands. The exact same thing happened in Germany in 1923. Industrialists who borrowed to build factories repaid the loans in money worth less than the paper it was printed on, and walked away owning everything, free and clear, while the savers and the pensioners were wiped out. Inflation is not just a tax, it's a wealth transfer, and it always runs the same direction, away from paper, toward real things bought with borrowed money. Asset 3. The self-sufficient estate. And notice, land alone didn't save you. Rome at its peak was hyper-connected. Spanish oil in Britain, Egyptian grain in the capital, a landowner who grew cash crops for export, who needed the markets and the trade routes, was ruined the moment that networks snapped. His land was still there. Its value wasn't. The estates that survived ran on the opposite logic, a closed loop. Grain, meat, wool, timber, tools, even their own blacksmiths and carpenters, all produced inside the walls. When the trade routes died, these villas barely noticed. They'd never depended on them. And as the state withdrew, tax collectors gone, legions unpaid, roads unsafe, the villa owner became the authority. He had food, security, work. He became, in effect, a small king. Those estates didn't just survive Rome. They became the blueprint for feudalism, the foundation of the entire world that came next. Asset 4. The irreplaceable skill. Here's the brutal sorting mechanism every collapse runs. Your credential is only worth as much as the institution standing behind it. When the institution dies, the credential dies with it. Two kinds of skill survived Rome. First, the skill that meets an unavoidable human need. The blacksmith who forges a plough from scrap. The physician who heals without imported medicine. The farmer, the miller, the carpenter. A broken plough in spring needs a blacksmith that week, whether the coin is silver or bronze, whether the emperor is alive or already dead. Second, the skill to trade across broken borders. The merchant who spoke the languages and moved goods between the kingdoms, carving up the old empire. And the lawyers, the bureaucrats, the imperial administrators? Their value was purely institutional. When the treasury went bankrupt, so did they. The people who carried Roman knowledge through the Dark Ages weren't the officials. They were the craftsmen, the ones whose skill no collapse could confiscate. So, 4 assets. Gold you could verify, debt in a dying currency, land that needed no one, and a skill that couldn't be faked. All 4 rooted in one principle Rome paid for in blood and bronze. What survives a collapse is never what the system values in good times. It's what can't be faked, can't be diluted, and can't be made useless when the system itself is gone. Rome's emperors believed a coin that looked like silver was as good as silver. They believed their sheer scale made them permanent. That scale is exactly what made the fall faster. And here's the thought to sit with. Every modern currency is further from real value than the worst Roman coin ever was. Every modern supply chain has more breaking points than Rome's ever did. Rome fell slowly, and then all at once. If this changed how you see money, subscribe. History already ran the experiment. I'll keep showing you the results.